Wells of Silence by TheBeckster. Chapter 7, 20 Weeks. Anakin was trying not to let her mind wander, but she just was not meant for sitting still in meetings, listening to senators drone on and on. She would never understand how Padme tolerated this day in and day out, 2 weeks in her new job as liaison, and all she had heard was budgeting. Nothing but budgeting. Were these senators or bankers? She was going to strangle the next person who dared to utter the words high interest loan in her presence. She took a deep breath and tried to calm herself. She was just on edge because Padme was off planet, even more so because he was working with that separatist scum Rush Clovis. Personal feelings aside, she still found it too suspicious that an outsider like Clovis had been welcomed into the upper echelons of the banking clan. On top of it all, he had a history of getting personal and handsy when Padme was involved. Never mind that he had actually poisoned him once. It was nothing short of infuriating that nobody else was as on edge about Padme's safety as she was. He didn't even have a Jedi escort accompany him to the negotiations, which Anakin thought was utterly foolish. If she wasn't pregnant, if she wasn't stuck on Coruscant, she would be right there with her husband every step of the way. She'd make sure nothing happened to him this time. Anakin snapped out of her furious mental cycle just long enough to realize the budget meeting was ending. Palpatine was sending off the senators with the assurance that he would get back to them as soon as he had word from Senator Anidala on Scipio. As the senators shuffled out of the office, not pleased, but placated for the time being, Mas Amida slipped in. He waited until the door shut, casting Anakin a sidelong glance before addressing Palpatine. Chancellor, you have a call waiting from Scipio. Ah, good. I was wondering when Senator Amidala would have news. Send it through. Palpatine gestured lazily with his hand, not looking up from his paperwork. Mas Amida bowed and turned to leave the room. Anakin moved to him, wanting to give the Chancellor his privacy. Of course she wanted to see Padme and see he was all right and hear him say he was coming home soon, but she wouldn't dare to assume she could sit in while the Chancellor took a call. Luckily, this banking mess wasn't something Palpatine was trying to keep too tightly under wraps. Anakin, my dear, you can stay. I dare say this will be news the Jedi Council would like to know, Palpatine offered, setting his work aside to prepare for the call. Thank you, Chancellor. Anakin bowed slightly to hide her soft smile. She was going to see Padme after all. She resumed her position off to the right of Palpatine's desk, waiting eagerly for Padme's hologram to appear. She was deeply disappointed and mildly concerned when a Mun appeared instead. Anakin recognized one of the heads of the banking clan. He seemed furious. Swallowing her growing unease, Anakin listened intently. Padme stared idly at the ceiling of his cell. The dim light in the corner cast the same shadows it had been for the last, how long had it been? A day or two? A week? He had tried to keep track of time with his sleep, but with nothing else to do in the cell, he found himself sleeping much more than usual. His meals weren't regular either. Water and dry rations had been waiting in his cell. When he finished that, more had appeared through a slot in the door. It never came on a schedule, just whenever Padme got around to finishing his portions. Padme couldn't hear anything that transpired outside his thick cell door. The single dim light never changed its quality. The passage of time meant nothing isolated in his cell. He figured that it hadn't been too long, though. Anakin would have busted him out if it had. Padme heaved a sigh and shifted, trying to find a more comfortable position on the hard cell bunk. At least he hadn't wasted him time in the cell entirely. He had spent much of his waking time planning what to do next about the banking clan, planning what to do about Clovis after he got out of the cell, planning for the twins' birth, planning speeches he would give in the upcoming months, planning diplomatic dinners and luncheons with various senators, figuring out how exactly he was going to apologize to Annie for all of this when it was over. It helped keep him sane. Suddenly, the door opened, casting bright light onto Padme's face. He sat up, shielding his eyes. It only took them a second to adjust. He first saw Jedi robes, and his heart stuttered fearfully. As much as he wanted to see his wife again, he did not want to see her. He did not want her to be on Scipio. If Anakin had come to pick him up, that was going to throw a wrench into his upcoming plans. He still had some business on Scipio, potentially dangerous business, and the last thing he wanted was Anakin in harm's way. Still blinking, his eyes moved up from the hem of the Jedi robes. He saw a familiar bearded face and was instantly relieved. Obi-Wan? How long have I been in here? About 3 days. The Jedi Master stepped aside to let Padme exit the cell. You've caused quite a stir, I'm afraid, he continued, sounding more amused than anything. But the banking clan has graciously agreed to release you into Republic custody. Obi-Wan waved off the Mun guards as they stepped out onto the prison's landing platform. Padme saw a ship painted in diplomatic red sitting empty and waiting for them. He noted with some satisfaction that it was a small, fast model. It would make his next step of the plan easier. I half expected Anakin to be the one to come get me, he commented on the distinct and quite surprising absence of his wife, even if she hadn't been the one to get him out of the jail. He expected her to be waiting with the ship or intimidating the Muns. She wanted to, but her duties to the Chancellor were more important. I volunteered instead. That's good, Padme sighed in relief, speaking without realizing what he was saying. I wouldn't want her putting the babies in harm's way. Obi-Wan stopped and gave the senator a curious look. She told you? Padme could have kicked himself. He had almost exposed them, and to Obi-Wan, a council member, his brain scrambled, trying to formulate a believable cover lie. Obi-Wan shook his head and continued walking. Of course she told you. Anakin can't keep a secret to save her life. Padme almost sighed in relief. We're still friends, he offered as an explanation with a shrug. Though, if it eases your mind, I haven't told anyone. Obi-Wan nodded in acknowledgement and half smiled. You should have seen her when she was told she couldn't come get you. Was she angry? Livid. I think the only thing that stopped her from hijacking a ship and coming out herself was a well-timed emergency meeting the Chancellor wanted her to sit in on. Padme chuckled. Well, I'll be happy to get back to Coruscant if it will put her at ease. He stopped short just as they reached the ship. But there is something I have to do first, and I need your help. Obi-Wan raised a quizzical eyebrow. And what would that be? Just a quick side trip. Anakin was going to kill Padme. She paced around Palpatine's office, her thoughts flying in a blinding flurry. She had taken so many turns since Palpatine had left to greet the returning senator, Obi-Wan and Clovis, that she was almost certain she had left permanent marks on the thick red carpet. Palpatine had asked her to wait here, knowing her dislike of Clovis and wanting the banking representative to get to his office before he was accosted by a furious Jedi. But really, what the hell was Padme thinking? She was going to kill her husband and Obi-Wan too, for that matter. How could he have gone along with Padme's plan? That kind of recklessness was something, well, it was something Anakin would have done. She never dreamed Obi-Wan would be that irresponsible. While she was at it, she might as well kill Clovis for good measure. That sneaking separatists has never been anything but trouble. Anakin stopped and tried to take some calming breaths. She could feel the group approaching, and as satisfying as it would be, it wouldn't do any good to attack them as soon as they stepped through the door. Stars. She just wanted to see Padme again, make sure he was safe, feel his heart beating and the warmth of his hands. She wanted to kiss him and never let him go. She wanted to kill him for being so stupid. She was seriously considering killing him while kissing him. Anakin breathed deeply, counting to 8 as she inhaled and exhaled. They were entering the Chancellor's suite, only a matter of moments now. Trying to maintain some semblance of normalcy, Anakin hurried to sit in her chair, hoping to appear that she was at ease. It wasn't very convincing, but at least she wasn't lurking in the doorway, itching to get her hands on her husband. The group stepped into Palpatine's office. Senator Organa and a couple others had joined them. Anakin rose to greet them, taking great relief in the fact that both Padme and Obi-Wan were unharmed. Senator Amidala, Master Obi-Wan, I'm glad to see you are safe. You had us worried. She pointedly ignored Clovis. Padme at least had the decency to look somewhat sheepish as he glanced across the room to his wife. Obi-Wan, however, was having none of it. A minor derailing of the plan, he explained with a casual wave of his hand. Nothing we haven't dealt with before, Anakin. That's good to hear, Anakin said with a smile. Her eyes relayed her true message. You two are both dead when we finish this. She only half paid attention while Padme reported on his findings in Scipio. She knew Padme's findings were critically important and rather terrifying. The banking clan was corrupt and practically broke, but she was more preoccupied with watching her husband and Clovis. They were hovering far too close to each other for her comfort. It was all she could do to not go and physically step in between them. At least now Padme's role in this matter was done. Whatever happened next in this mess, Padme would be safe. She tried to tune back into the discussion at hand when the Chancellor started speaking. She immediately wished she hadn't. Senator Amidala, I would like you to spearhead this investigation. You are already familiar with the details. Work closely with Rush, Clovis, and expose these secret accounts. We will know how to best handle this situation once we know exactly what we are dealing with. Padme nodded. Yes, Chancellor, I will do my best. Palpatine rose from his seat, ending the meeting. Anger and fear flickered in Anakin's stomach. Padme had agreed to the Chancellor's plans. No hesitation or opening a discussion of the threats facing him if he proceeded. Padme could die if he had to trust the likes of Clovis. She and Padme trailed behind the group as they left Palpatine's office. It was easy enough to lag behind far enough that when the door closed behind them, everyone else was already several yards ahead and showed no sign of stopping or looking back. Anakin took her husband's arm and pulled him off to the side. Why didn't you just say no? She demanded in a low voice. Say no? Anakin, this isn't something I can just duck out of now. I'm too involved. You don't have to be. This is dangerous. The Chancellor asked me to. What was I supposed to say? Last time you worked with Clovis, he almost killed you. And this time he got you arrested. You need to trust me, Annie. I know what I'm doing. I do trust you, Padme. I don't trust Clovis. I don't either, but I have to keep playing him. He knows something we don't. We can't let him get away. The Republic needs this to be fixed. What about me? I need you, Padme. Anakin paused. She grabbed her husband's hand and laid it over their children. We need you. You can't go running off and getting yourself hurt or killed. Padme slipped his hand away quickly, looking around nervously. Someone will see you, Annie. She clenched her fist, but let them drop to her side. Do you know how hard it was for me to sit here idly while Obi-Wan had to bail you out of prison? She tried to keep the shaking out of her voice and looked anywhere but at her husband's face. Do you know how many times I saw what, Anakin? Padme asked softly, stepping closer. Are you still having nightmares? They're not just nightmares, Padme. She snapped and turned away. As your wife, I demand you step out of this mission. Demand? Padme's voice took a harsh edge. We've been over this before, Anakin. You have to trust me on this. I know what I'm doing. I'm not. He was interrupted by someone clearing their throat softly. They both whipped around to face the intruder. Anakin's scowl deepened and rage flickered in her belly even stronger. How had she not noticed him sneaking up on them? Clovis stood there, looking not at all bothered by the fact that he had just interrupted their argument. Excuse the interruption, Senator Amidala. We should get started on our planning as soon as possible. Yes, of course, Padme said, his tone taking an immediate turn back to his gentle senatorial norm. Clovis looked to Anakin. General Skywalker, he nodded to her curtly. I must admit, I'm quite surprised you have not become involved in this matter. Something such as this is right up your alley, if I recall. I'm on special assignment with the Chancellor. Anakin growled. I see. Rush turned to Padme and offered his arm. Shall we? Yes, we should get started right away. The sooner this is fixed, the better it will be for everyone. Padme turned back to Anakin and gave her a reproachful and apologetic look. He then stepped forward and took Clovis' arm, leading him back to his office, no doubt. Anakin grit her teeth and thundered after them once they had turned the corner. She knew better than to follow them, but she also wasn't going to hang around here for the rest of the day. If the Chancellor asked about her absence, she could always use a doctor's appointment for an excuse. She stormed to her speeder and flew back to the temple. She might not be able to physically work out her frustrations anymore. Healers had barred her from the training rooms. But she had a few projects waiting on her bench that needed to be pounded into shape. That was where Obi-Wan found her several hours later, scowling and welding her last project together. She found it nothing short of ironic that she had been struggling to find the motivation to finish up the projects cluttering her workbench for weeks. Today, she had blown through them like they were nothing. She was on her last droid head in need of repairs and reprogramming. You're setting this entire corner of the temple on edge, her master offered as a greeting, letting himself into her room. Anakin sighed and shut off her welder. Something wrong? You tell me. She scowled again and set her torch aside, reaching for a wrench. I don't trust Clovis, and I don't like Senator Amidala working with him. Don't you think don't you think you're overreacting a bit? Senator Amidala is capable of taking care of himself. I would argue that everyone else is underreacting. Anakin snapped back, tightening the last few bolts on the droid head. Obi-Wan studied her critically. Anakin, your judgment has always been clouded when Senator Amidala is involved. Now more so than ever, no doubt in relation to your current condition. Are you suggesting that I'm being hormonal and irrational? Anakin slammed her wrench down on the bench and stalked to the other side of the room. She threw herself down onto one of the several crates of spare parts stacked in the corner, glaring at Obi-Wan the entire time. I think you're feeling more protective than usual over people you care about, particularly Senator Amidala. Can you blame me? He's working with someone who tried to kill him, but everyone seems to be forgetting that except me. I know you care deeply for the Senator, Anakin, but it is not your responsibility to protect him. Senator Amidala has been at risk many times before, and he is more than capable of taking care of himself. We're just friends, she insisted. Obi-Wan spoke calmly, refusing to give rise to Anakin's anger. I never suggested you weren't, Anakin. She glowered and looked away. Obi-Wan sat on the edge of her bed and tried softening her with some gentle guidance. What you're feeling isn't wrong, Anakin. You are allowed to have feelings for and about the Senator. It's natural, I understand to a degree what you are going through. Anakin knew he was talking about Satine. She had teased Obi-Wan relentlessly about his teenage crush on the Mandalorian queen, but she also knew that despite their years of distance and never taking the plunge that she and Padme had, they still had strong feelings for each other. It was obvious when you knew what signs to look for in a Jedi hiding their true emotions. She was hardly the first or the only Jedi to fall in love. She was just the one unfortunate enough to have physical evidence of said love. Unconsciously, her hand slid over her stomach. Amidala and Clovis have had a past relationship, she explained, not quite able to take the edge off her voice. I just think that Senator Amidala will have trouble keeping his emotions clear in this situation. He will. Or you? Obi-Wan asked softly. Anakin clenched her fists but didn't respond. It's no concern of yours whether the Senator engages in a relationship, Anakin. Anakin snorted derisively and almost snapped back a retort. If only Obi-Wan knew how much Padme's relationships actually did concern her. She was well within her rights to worry about her husband. Obi-Wan gave her a reproachful look. Anakin, as a Jedi, you have a responsibility to the Order first, regardless of whatever might develop between Senator Amidala and Rush Clovis. I am well aware of my responsibility to the Order, Obi-Wan, she barked, jumping to her feet. One hand went over her stomach again. And it's just business between them. Then there should be no trouble, should there? Anakin growled at Obi-Wan. No, I guess there won't be. End of chapter.